This puppy was minutes from being put down, until the vet wiped its collar and uncovered a secret that could unravel a town's darkest mystery. What happened next will restore your faith in fate, in loyalty, and in the idea that some bonds never break, not even through fire and time. Just when everyone had given up hope, an unbelievable truth crawled its way back into the light. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing our global family come together. And trust us, what unfolds in the next few minutes will leave you breathless. Stick with us until the end, because the final reveal, it changes everything. The storm outside Graybridge Veterinary Clinic rattled the windows like fists pounding from the other side. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe leaned over her desk, finishing her final patient report as the rain danced violently on the rooftop above. She was exhausted, 12 hours straight on her feet, 2 emergency surgeries, and countless routine visits from pets and worried owners. She muttered to herself, "5 more minutes and I'm out of here," her fingers trembling slightly as they typed the final few lines. The clinic clock read 8:54 p.m., and all she could think about was the hot bath waiting for her at home. She'd earned it. That's when the front door slammed open. A gust of wind and rain swirled into the lobby, scattering papers and rattling the blinds. Evelyn jumped, startled, her pulse kicking up. Standing in the doorway was Officer Graham Lister from Graybridge Animal Control, completely soaked, his uniform clinging to him like a second skin. In his arms was a sodden towel, and inside that bundle, something was moving. "Dr. Marlowe," he said, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "I'm sorry, I didn't know where else to go." Evelyn's fatigue momentarily vanished. She stood, crossing the room quickly. "What's going on?" He pulled the towel open to reveal a trembling puppy, golden brown, barely 4 months old. Mud crusted its fur, and its wide eyes radiated pure fear. It didn't bark. It didn't growl. It just stared. "I found it behind the Daleson Market. Shelter's beyond full," Graham said. "They're set to start the list tomorrow, and this little one's first in line." Evelyn's jaw tightened. She didn't need him to say what the list meant. She hated that word, euthanasia, just clinical enough to mask the heartbreak behind it. Her clinic was already at full capacity. She was stretched thin, and she'd sworn she wouldn't get attached again. Not after last time. "I can't take in another one, Graham," she said quietly, even as the puppy whimpered softly in his arms. "Just for the night," he pleaded. "Maybe someone calls. Maybe there's a microchip. Just give it one more chance." The puppy looked at her then, not just at her, but into her, and something inside her, something she thought long buried, stirred. She sighed, then gestured to the exam table. "Put him here." Graham obeyed, setting the bundle down. Evelyn grabbed a clean towel, her movements brisk but gentle. She dried the little dog, her fingers carefully avoiding any sore spots as she inspected its limbs, ribs, eyes. "Well, you're in one piece," she murmured. "No fractures, no illness signs." As she combed through the matted fur behind its neck, she paused. Her fingers touched worn leather. "A collar?" she said aloud, surprised. She untangled it carefully. It was cracked and dirty, but clearly handmade. Leather, stitched with care. Faded. Old. Almost antique. Evelyn squinted at the markings. Most of the letters had worn away from time, but faint etchings remained. She adjusted the exam lamp, holding the collar beneath the light. Slowly, letters emerged. Barely visible, but unmistakable. "If found, bring me home." Beneath that, an address. 237 Willowridge Lane. Evelyn froze. She knew that address. Everyone in Graybridge did. It had been empty for years, ever since the fire. Her mouth went dry as her mind reeled. Willowridge Lane. The Grafton family home. Gone in a blaze 3 years ago. The tragedy still haunted the town. 4 family members gone, but only 3 bodies recovered. The youngest, Liam Grafton, had vanished without a trace. 6 years old. His face had been on every telephone pole, every bulletin board. Then one day the search stopped, and the town moved on. but Evelyn never forgot. And now this puppy, barely 4 months old, was wearing a collar engraved with that exact address. She glanced down at the trembling creature on her table. It looked up at her again with those same soulful eyes. Not afraid anymore. Expectant. Like it knew. Like it remembered. Evelyn's breath hitched. She stepped back, the collar still in her hands. Her heart thundered in her chest. Was this just coincidence? Or had this puppy walked out of the ashes of a mystery left unsolved? And if Liam Grafton was never found, why did this puppy seem to know exactly who it had belonged to? She almost turned away, but what the puppy wore around its neck led her straight into a tragedy everyone thought was buried. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe stood frozen under the glow of the exam lamp, the collar still resting in her hands like it might burn her if she gripped it too tight. The weight of those faintly etched words, "If found, bring me home," clung to the air, thicker than the antiseptic scent of the clinic. 237 Willow Ridge Lane. That address had been the center of every local newspaper for weeks, maybe months, 3 years ago. The Grafton house had burned in the dead of night. The flames lit the sky like a funeral pyre. They recovered the remains of the parents, Marshall and Irene, and their teenage daughter, Emily. But 6-year-old Liam? Gone. Not in the wreckage, not in the woods, not anywhere. And now, this nameless puppy, barely the size of a football, wearing a collar from a house that no longer existed? It didn't make sense. Evelyn felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. A strange cold seeped into her chest, one that had nothing to do with the storm outside. She looked at the puppy again. It was curled up on the exam table now, paws tucked under its body, but its eyes, those big, deep, unnervingly expressive eyes, were locked on hers. "Where did you come from?" she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. The storm had started to quiet. Only soft rain remained, tapping gently against the windows like fingers seeking entry. Evelyn wrapped the puppy in a dry towel and cradled it in her arms. She should call Officer Lister back, should hand the puppy off and walk away. But she didn't. Instead, she walked the pup down the narrow hallway to the holding kennels. The overhead lights buzzed faintly as she passed under them. She chose the cleanest kennel, laid down a soft blanket, and set the puppy inside gently. "Just for the night," she said aloud, though it sounded like a lie the moment it left her lips. As she locked the kennel door, the puppy pressed its nose to the metal grate, its eyes following her every movement. When she turned away, it whimpered, a soft, pleading sound. Evelyn paused mid-step, her throat tight. She didn't sleep well that night. Her dreams were a fractured mess of fire, shadows, and a child's voice crying from somewhere she couldn't reach. By the time the morning sun began slicing through the clouds, Evelyn was already parked outside the clinic, coffee in hand, eyes red-rimmed from too little rest. She stared at the building, her fingers tightening around the cup. "It's just a dog," she told herself, but even she didn't believe it anymore. Inside, the clinic felt sterile and untouched, like a stage waiting for the next act. She moved through her morning routine with robotic precision, coat on hook, files organized, overnight logs reviewed, and then she walked to the kennels. The puppy was already awake, tail thumping rhythmically against the kennel floor. When it saw her, it let out a soft bark. Not loud, just enough to say, "You're back." "Good morning," Evelyn said, her voice cracking. She opened the kennel door and the puppy leapt into her arms like it had been waiting hours for the reunion. Its fur, now dry, gleamed a golden brown in the early light, with a white patch near its chest shaped almost like a heart. Evelyn couldn't help but smile, even as confusion and dread still pulled at her. She carried it back to the exam table. "Let's see if you've got any more secrets, huh?" As she examined the collar again, a thought struck her. Why would a brand new puppy, this small, this young, be wearing an old collar from 3 years ago? The timeline didn't fit. She reached into her desk drawer, pulling out a UV light and magnifier. It was something she used when checking for ticks or hidden wounds on animals with dark fur. But it worked just as well on old leather. She brought the collar under the light. The engraving flared faintly. Not just the address this time. There was a name. LG. Evelyn's breath caught. LG. Liam Grafton? She looked at the puppy again, now wagging its tail like they were playing a game. This doesn't make sense, she murmured, heart pounding. None of this makes sense. She reached for her phone and typed the address into a property records database. Nothing came up. The house had been marked condemned and erased from the system, but she knew it still stood, what was left of it anyway. A scorched lot, a burned-out skeleton, a place everyone in town avoided, a ghost of what once was. Her thumb hovered over the call button to reach Graham, but she didn't press it. Instead, Evelyn set the collar on her desk, picked up the puppy, and whispered to herself, "We're going to Willow Ridge." She didn't believe in ghosts until the puppy led her to a house swallowed by fire and silence, and something watching from the shadows. The streets of Graybridge were still damp, puddles glittering like broken glass under the morning sun. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe gripped the steering wheel tighter than she needed to. The puppy sat in a travel carrier on the passenger seat, oddly calm, as if it understood where they were going. 237 Willow Ridge Lane, a location that most of Graybridge had filed away as a closed chapter. Forgotten, abandoned, avoided. But Evelyn couldn't shake the chill that had settled in her bones since last night. The houses on the way grew older and sparser, their paint faded and their windows curtained tight. As she turned onto Willow Ridge, she slowed to a crawl. It was exactly as she remembered. The Grafton house, or what remained of it, stood like a skeleton on a forgotten battlefield. A rusted chain-link fence surrounded the blackened structure, and weeds pushed through the cracks in the sidewalk like nature, trying to erase the scars of what once was. Evelyn parked along the curb, engine idling. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring. The puppy whined softly. "You really want me to go in there?" she asked, half joking. The puppy barked once. She killed the engine. The gate creaked like an old whisper as she pushed it open. The air smelled of wet earth and old soot. With the puppy tucked in one arm and the collar clutched in her other hand, Evelyn stepped carefully around broken bricks and rotted wood. Vines had overtaken the porch, climbing the charred remains of what used to be cheerful blue pillars. All that was left now was blackened timber and ash-smeared memories. She paused at the threshold of the collapsed entryway. "This place shouldn't still exist," she whispered. The wind stirred through the house's remains, and somewhere inside something clattered. The puppy squirmed in her arms, ears perked. And then Evelyn heard it too. Movement, not the wind. Footsteps. She spun around. An elderly woman stood across the yard next to the home beside the lot, watering a row of flowers that looked wildly out of place against all this ruin. "Looking for someone?" the woman called, her voice raspy but clear. Evelyn stepped back instinctively, but quickly composed herself. "Sorry, I didn't mean to trespass. I'm Dr. Marlowe from the Graybridge Animal Clinic." The woman nodded and turned off her hose. "Evelyn Marlowe," she repeated. "I know that name. My cat had surgery with you last fall." Evelyn smiled awkwardly. "Small town." "Very," the woman replied, crossing the lawn. "I'm Celeste Brighton. Lived here 42 years. You're standing where the Grafton house used to be." "I remember," Evelyn said, glancing at the burned-out structure. "I was here the night it burned." Celeste's eyes dimmed. "Tragedy," she murmured. "Worst I ever saw." Fire started in the kitchen. By the time the sirens came, it was too late. "What happened to them?" Evelyn asked softly. "Marshall, Irene, and Emily. They found them." Celeste's gaze drifted. "But Liam, he vanished. They searched for weeks. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers from 3 towns over. Nothing. Not a shoe. Not a footprint." Evelyn hesitated, then unzipped the carrier and lifted the puppy out. "Have you ever seen this dog before?" Celeste's brows knitted together. She stepped closer, tilting her head. "Number, but that collar." Evelyn held it out. Celeste's eyes widened. "That's Marshall's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. He made leather goods for the farmer's market. Custom collars, belts, wallets. Said engraving was an act of permanence in a world full of temp jobs." Evelyn stared at the woman. "Then this was Liam's dog?" Celeste shook her head. No, Liam had a dog, yes. But this can't be it. Why not? Because that dog was in the fire. Silence fell like a shroud. Evelyn looked at the puppy, who now sat quietly, staring into the ruins of its possible past. I'm telling you, Celeste continued, her voice low, that dog died the night the house did. Evelyn's blood turned cold, but then the puppy looked up at her again, calm, expectant, aware. What if it didn't? She whispered. Or worse, what if it came back for a reason? This wasn't just a stray, it was a message, a silent witness to something no one else remembered or dared to face. Evelyn Marlowe drove back to the clinic with the puppy curled up in the passenger seat, the collar placed carefully on the dashboard like evidence in a case that had never been solved. Her mind was a storm of images, Celeste's haunted eyes, the ashes of the Grafton home, and the undeniable familiarity of that collar script. Back at the clinic, the familiar sterile scent hit her the moment she stepped through the door, but today it felt different, like the air itself was holding its breath. She settled the puppy into a clean recovery bed, laying out food, water, and a fleece blanket that once belonged to one of her old rescues. The pup sniffed it once, turned in a slow circle, and curled up as if it belonged there. But Evelyn couldn't sit still. She booted up her computer and pulled open every archived news article she could find about the Grafton fire. Some were factual, reports of the blaze, quotes from fire marshals. Others were drenched in speculation, gas leak, faulty wiring, even whispers of arson. One article claimed Liam had been seen weeks before near the woods outside town, but police had dismissed it as wishful thinking. She dug deeper, looking into property records, fire incident reports, even scanned police interviews. That's when something caught her eye. Timeline inconsistency. According to the official report, the fire occurred on March 19th, just after midnight. But in one witness interview, a neighbor claimed to have seen a young boy, about 6 or 7, with a golden puppy, wandering near the old lumber yard 3 days after the fire. Evelyn blinked at the screen. Why wasn't this followed up? She reached for her phone and tapped through her contacts until she found a familiar name. Detective Nora Bellamy, now retired, but once the lead investigator on the Grafton case. The phone rang 3 times before a raspy voice picked up. Hello? Nora, it's Evelyn Marlowe. I was hoping I could ask you about the Grafton fire. A pause, then. I thought everyone had let that go. I haven't, Evelyn replied. And I think something was missed. Nora exhaled slowly. That case nearly broke me, Ev. I lost sleep over it for a year. You think I didn't chase down every lead? That kid was gone. Vanished. Like smoke. I'm not accusing you, but I have something. A puppy. Found yesterday with a collar engraved with 237 Willow Ridge. And it looks too young to have been there then. But somehow, it feels connected. Silence. Do you have a picture of the collar? Nora asked finally. Evelyn snapped a photo and sent it over. Seconds passed. Then came the reply. That's real, Marshall Grafton's leatherwork, no doubt. Then how? I don't know, Nora said flatly. But if that collar resurfaced, and the address was never publicized, someone put it there for a reason. Evelyn swallowed hard. I still have the case files, Nora continued. Come by tomorrow. I'll pull the logs, the reports, all of it. Thank you. As she ended the call, Evelyn felt her throat tighten. The room around her felt smaller, heavier. She glanced at the puppy in the recovery bed. It was awake now, staring at her, ears perked like it had heard every word. You know more than you're letting on, don't you? The puppy blinked slowly. That night she stayed at the clinic long after closing. She brought the puppy into her office, refusing to let it sleep alone. Every so often, it would lift its head and glance toward the door, as if expecting someone or something to walk in. Sometime past midnight, Evelyn dozed off in the recliner. She dreamt of fire, but not just flames, screaming, confusion, the sound of paws running across tile, and then a voice, faint, childlike, calling out a name she hadn't heard in years. Lucky! Lucky, come back! She jerked awake with a start, heart pounding. The puppy was sitting up now, watching her closely. Her phone buzzed with a message. From Nora. One more thing. There's a name I want you to look up. Paige Ellery. She lived near the Graftons. Said she saw something strange the night of the fire. Never made the final report. Evelyn whispered the name to herself. Paige Ellery. And in that moment she knew. She wasn't just caring for a lost dog. She'd stepped straight into a mystery that wasn't finished with her yet. A forgotten witness, a buried memory, and a single sentence that made Evelyn's blood run cold. The next morning, Evelyn didn't bother opening the clinic at her usual hour. She scribbled a note for her assistant to reschedule all appointments and lock the front door behind her. Today wasn't about work. Today was about chasing the impossible. The puppy, still unnamed, still unnervingly aware, sat in the back seat of her car as she drove across town. Every so often it had let out a low whine, soft and restless, whenever she slowed near intersections. The address Nora had given her for Paige Ellery led to a weathered two-story house on the outskirts of Graybridge. The porch sagged in the middle, and wind chimes clinked against one another in the breeze like anxious whispers. Evelyn parked in the gravel drive and took a breath before walking up to the door. She knocked once, twice. No answer. Just as she was about to knock again, the door creaked open. A woman in her 50s stood behind it, her hair in a messy braid, eyes sharp and guarded. She wore a thick cardigan despite the warming spring air. Yes, she said warily. Ms. Ellery? I'm Dr. Evelyn Marlowe, from the clinic. I was hoping I could ask you something. It's about the Grafton fire. Paige's eyes narrowed immediately. That was a long time ago. I know, but something's come up, something that might matter. There was a long pause. Then Paige stepped aside. You'd better come in. The inside of the house smelled like old books and chamomile. Shelves lined the walls filled with mismatched trinkets and dusty photo frames. Evelyn noticed a pair of old dog bowls tucked near the base of the fridge, though no pets seemed present. You're not the first one to come asking, Paige said, leading her to a cluttered living room. But you might be the first one who doesn't think I'm crazy. I'm listening, Evelyn said gently. Paige sat down across from her, folding her hands in her lap. I was sitting out on my porch the night it happened. Couldn't sleep. My dog, Harley, kept pacing near the fence. He was growling, but not like he was scared. More like confused. What time was this? Right before the fire started, around 11:45, maybe closer to midnight. Paige's voice grew quieter. I looked toward the Grafton place and saw something I've never forgotten. A boy, small, walking through the backyard holding something. A leash, I think. Evelyn leaned forward. Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination? Paige met her gaze firmly. The fire hadn't started yet. And that boy, he looked right at me, just for a second. What happened next? He stepped into the woods. The woods, Evelyn echoed. The police never mentioned that in their reports. Paige nodded grimly. That's because no one ever believed me. They said it was too dark, that I must have seen shadows, but I know what I saw, and Harley never barked at shadows. Evelyn's pulse was hammering. Could you tell what kind of dog it was? Paige hesitated. Just a blur. Golden, maybe. But I'll never forget the way that boy moved. Not like he was running. More like he knew exactly where he was going. Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a printed photo of the collar. Do you recognize this? Paige took the picture, and her eyes widened. That's Marshall's style. He always used brass rivets and stitched the edges by hand. Sold them at the Sunday market. My sister still has a belt he made. Then she leaned in closer. Where did you get this? A puppy showed up at my clinic. Wearing that. Paige blinked. That can't be. It was found yesterday behind the grocery store. Young, maybe 4 or 5 months old, but wearing a collar from a house that's been gone 3 years. Paige stood suddenly and walked over to the bookshelf. She pulled down a small box, opened it, and took out a faded photograph. She handed it to Evelyn. This was Liam and his dog. taken 2 months before the fire. Evelyn stared at the image. A little boy with unruly curls grinned from beneath a blanket fort in the backyard, clutching a golden puppy with a white patch on its chest, identical to the one sleeping in her back seat. "No," Evelyn whispered. "That's not possible." And then Paige said something that stopped her heart. "I've always believed," she said slowly, "that Liam never died in that fire." Evelyn looked up, eyes wide. Paige's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because sometimes the ones who vanish aren't lost. They're hiding." She showed the puppy an old photo just to be sure. But its reaction shattered everything she thought she knew about animals and memories. Back at the clinic, Evelyn Marlowe stepped through the door with Paige Ellery's words echoing in her mind. Sometimes, the ones who vanish aren't lost. They're hiding. The moment she entered her office, the puppy sprang to life from its fleece blanket, tail thumping against the floor, eyes locked on her with that same alert expression. It didn't bark. It didn't leap. It just stared, like it knew she was bringing something important. Evelyn pulled the photograph out of her coat pocket, her fingers trembling. It was old but clear. Little Liam Grafton, no older than 6, sat on the grass of a sunny backyard, arms wrapped tightly around a squirmy golden puppy with a white patch on its chest. This puppy. She sat on the floor in front of the crate and held up the photo. "Hey, little one," she murmured. "Do you know this?" The puppy froze. Its tail went stiff. Its ears perked so high they nearly touched each other. And then it did something Evelyn hadn't expected. It whined, a long, trembling whimper that cracked something open in her chest. The puppy's eyes filled with something she could only describe as grief. It reached forward, pawing gently at the photo, then barked once. High-pitched, urgent, like it wanted her to understand something. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't recognition like when a dog sees a treat. This was emotional, visceral. "Okay," she whispered. "That's you, isn't it? You're the same one." But how? The original puppy would have been nearly 4 years old now. The one in front of her couldn't be more than 6 months. Reincarnation? Descendant? Or something else entirely? She needed help. She dialed Nora Bellamy's number again. "Did you find Paige?" Nora asked the second she picked up. Yes, and she remembered everything. Even had a photo of Liam and the original puppy. And, Evelyn glanced down, the one I'm caring for now, it reacted to the photo. Not like a normal dog would, like it remembered. A silence passed over the line. "I've seen a lot of strange things in my life," Nora said finally. "But this? You've either got a miracle or a message in your care." Evelyn's voice dropped. "What if it's both?" "I'm sending over everything from the case tonight," Nora added. "Scans of witness interviews, site reports, even some leads we never pursued." She paused. "And Evelyn, keep that dog safe. Whatever it is, it knows something." That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. Instead, she printed out every file Nora sent and laid them across her kitchen table like puzzle pieces. Statements from neighbors, fire department reports, even an early sketch of the crime scene, drawn before the full extent of the destruction was known. She noticed something strange in a witness interview dated 3 days after the fire. Witness Alan Temple, Graybridge Forest Ranger. Report: saw small footprints in the mud behind the tree line north of Willow Ridge. Looked like a child's, maybe 7 or 8, too small for adult boots. Found faint paw prints beside them. I marked the location but figured it was unrelated. Never followed up. Evelyn stood so fast her chair toppled. She rushed to her bookshelf and pulled out an old trail map of Graybridge Forest. With a red pen, she marked the location referenced, north of Willow Ridge, just beyond the old Milner footbridge. She stared at the spot. It was remote, nearly inaccessible by car. And if someone were hiding, no one would find them there. The puppy, now curled on her couch, lifted its head and stared at her like it could feel her thoughts moving. "What if you were trying to lead us this whole time?" Evelyn said, voice hoarse. She looked back down at the photograph. Liam Grafton and a puppy that looked just like the one sleeping on her couch. A family that burned, a child that vanished, a town that forgot. But not everyone had forgotten. Somehow, some way, this dog remembered. And now so did she. She reached for her keys, her coat, and a flashlight. "Let's go," she said to the pup, who leapt off the couch without hesitation. She followed the footprints through the forest. But what she found waiting at the end wasn't just a clue. It was a forgotten life trying to be remembered. The trees of Greybridge Forest whispered secrets as Evelyn stepped off the gravel path and into the underbrush. Her flashlight cut through the misty air in a narrow beam, but it couldn't banish the weight in her chest. The puppy trotted beside her, silent but alert, nose twitching every few steps like it knew exactly where they were going. They had parked at the base of the Milner footbridge, a wooden structure that stretched across a thin stream, slick with moss and thyme. Beyond it, no trails, just untamed woodland that hadn't seen footsteps in years. But Evelyn followed the map, and the puppy led the way. The farther they went, the quieter the world became. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Only the crunch of dead leaves and the low rustle of the wind filled the air. The trees closed in, tall and ancient, like sentinels guarding buried truths. Evelyn's flashlight swept across the ground as she walked. Then she saw it. Footprints. Faint, small, almost washed away by time. But they were there, human, child-sized, and next to them, paw prints, tiny light impressions from a young dog. She stopped. Her heart pounded. This isn't possible," she whispered. The puppy moved ahead, tail stiff, nose low. It weaved between tree trunks until it came to a dense thicket of thorn brush. Evelyn crouched to follow. She pushed aside the sharp branches, wincing as they scratched at her arms. And then, on the other side, was a clearing, small, hidden, and impossible. A makeshift shelter stood near a cluster of boulders, branches woven into walls, sheets of faded plastic tarp acting as a roof. A fire pit sat cold and dead in the center, ringed by blackened stones. A rusted tin can balanced on a log nearby, filled with rainwater. It looked abandoned, but not forgotten. The puppy whined and stepped forward slowly, cautiously. It sniffed the air, ears twitching, and let out a low sound. Half growl, half cry. "Is someone here?" Evelyn called gently. No answer. She moved carefully around the perimeter of the shelter. Everything about it was wrong. It wasn't the kind of fort a child builds for fun. It was weatherproofed, reinforced, lived in, survived in. Her flashlight beam fell on a worn backpack tucked beneath the lean-to's overhang. She knelt, heart thudding, and opened the flap. Inside, a crumpled wool blanket, a plastic fork, a water bottle, and an old toy truck, faded red, one wheel missing. And then, beneath it all, a photograph. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. It was the same image Paige Ellery had shown her. Liam Grafton, laughing under a blanket fort. Only this print had something scrawled on the back in pencil. "Don't forget." Evelyn's breath hitched. She looked around the clearing again. Someone had lived here, recently, and whoever they were trying to remember. Suddenly, the puppy barked sharply. Evelyn turned. A figure darted between the trees beyond the clearing, too fast to see clearly, but tall, thin, and human. "Wait!" she shouted, stumbling forward. "Please, stop!" But the figure vanished into the woods. She ran after it, the puppy close at her heels, ducking low-hanging branches and leaping over fallen logs. "Come back!" she yelled. The figure was gone. She stopped near a mossy stump, gasping for breath. The puppy whined at her feet, ears flattened, as if sensing her fear and confusion. Evelyn looked around, just trees and silence. But then she noticed something carved into the stump. Fresh, jagged, rushed, LG. Her knees buckled, and she sat in the leaves. It was real. All of it. A boy had survived the fire. He had lived in these woods, and now he was running from her. She looked at the puppy, who stared at the initials, with something like understanding in its eyes. "This is Liam," she whispered. "You've been trying to find him this whole time." The puppy wagged its tail just once, a small, solemn confirmation. She thought the fire was the end of the story. But now a single name whispered in an old report was about to change everything she believed. Evelyn Marlowe didn't sleep when she returned from the forest. She barely even sat down. She walked straight to her desk, spread out the files Nora had sent her, and began matching dates, names, places, anything that might explain what she saw, what she felt. The puppy was curled under the desk, chin resting on its paws, eyes watching her like it had been waiting years for her to figure this out. She read every report twice, then a third time, and then she found it. A witness statement filed 10 days after the fire. It had been buried in the non-credible section of the folder, red flagged and dismissed. Witness name, Everett Boone. Occupation, retired firefighter. Statement, the night of the Grafton fire, I arrived before the engine crews. I live just 4 blocks down. I was out walking my dog when I saw the first flames. I ran to the house, heard yelling, someone inside. But when I tried to enter, a man stopped me. Said he was a first responder. Tall, dark jacket, no visible badge. Said the child had already been rescued. Told me to stay back. I believed him, until the news said the boy was never found. Evelyn's eyes locked on that paragraph. Her fingers gripped the paper so tight it crumpled. Who was that man? She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece it together. If Everett Boone really saw someone claiming to be a first responder, but wasn't, then someone got to Liam before the flames did. And that someone took him. But why? Her thoughts spiraled. Could it have been an abduction? A rescue gone wrong? Or someone trying to cover up something worse? She opened her laptop and searched the fire crew roster from that night. Every name was accounted for. No unknown responders, no off-duty heroes. Just one odd note scribbled in the margin of a shift report. Unidentified male seen near fire perimeter. No gear. Disappeared before questioning. Her skin went cold. She turned back to Everett's statement. Tall, dark jacket, no badge. Someone had impersonated a firefighter and gotten away with it. She ran a search for Everett Boone, praying he was still alive. The phone rang 6 times before a voice answered. Hoarse but steady. This is Boone. Mr. Boone, this is Dr. Evelyn Marlowe. I work at the animal clinic in Graybridge. I know this is unexpected, but I've been reviewing reports from the Grafton fire. There was a long silence. Then, that night still keeps me up, he said quietly. I begged them to follow up. No one believed me. I do, she said. And then she told him everything. The puppy, the collar, the forest shelter, the initials carved into the stump. By the time she finished, Boone's voice had turned sharp. Someone took that boy, Doc. I knew it then. I know it now. And I think that someone was watching that house long before it burned. Evelyn's chest tightened. You think it was planned? I don't know what it was, he said. But someone wanted that kid out of that house. And if he's still alive, he's hiding, she whispered. Then you better ask yourself, from what? The line clicked dead. Evelyn sat frozen, the question echoing in her head. What was Liam Grafton hiding from? She looked down at the puppy, who had sat up now, tail still, eyes alert, and in its gaze she saw it again. That impossible look. Like it had carried a secret across the years, hoping someone would listen. She picked up her phone again and dialed Nora. I think someone took Liam before the fire started, she said the moment Nora answered. And I think he survived. You're serious? Nora sounded wide awake now. What do you have? Evelyn explained everything she'd found. The shelter, the footprints, Everett Boone's report. Nora let out a low whistle. That name, Boone, I remember. He used to call every week for months after the case closed. Said we'd missed something. Eventually, they told him to stop. Well, he didn't, Evelyn said, and I'm starting to think he was the only one paying attention. What do you need from me? Help me figure out who that man was, Evelyn said. The one Boone saw that night. Someone who had access to the neighborhood, Someone who could disappear? I'll look through the original incident file, Nora replied. See if anyone was connected to the Graftons in an unofficial capacity. Groundskeepers, delivery drivers, neighbors. Thanks, Evelyn said. But Nora's voice turned quiet again. Evelyn, be careful. The further you go into this, the more dangerous it feels. Evelyn looked at the sleeping puppy and the silence in its eyes. I don't think we have a choice anymore. They called it an accident, but buried in the ashes was a name that never made the reports, and when Evelyn found it, she understood why. The next morning, Evelyn sat hunched over the front desk of her clinic, surrounded by a wall of paper and digital files. Her coffee had long gone cold. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard as she stared at a list Nora had emailed her just before dawn. Known Grafton family associates, both professional and personal, gathered from interviews and archived neighborhood watch reports. At first, nothing stood out. Delivery drivers, mail carriers, local contractors. Then her eyes locked onto one name that wasn't on the official emergency response list, but was mentioned in two separate statements. Gareth Langdon, landscaper. Worked Willow Ridge Lane on and off for 3 years. The notes were vague. He did odd jobs, mostly yard cleanup, and sometimes winter prep. The Graftons hired him monthly, but when Evelyn cross-referenced his name in the fire reports, there was no mention of him having been interviewed. Not once. She searched the public record system, and her stomach dropped. Gareth Langdon had a sealed juvenile record. Arrested at 17, suspicion of arson, charges dropped. The details were thin, redacted in some places, but the location of the incident chilled her. Graybridge, 2002. Just 5 streets from Willowridge. She leaned back, pulse thudding in her ears. Could it have been him? Could this Langdon, now a man likely in his late 30s, have returned to Willowridge the night of the fire? She tapped her phone screen and called Nora. I need a background pull on Gareth Langdon. Now. Nora didn't even ask why. I'll text you what I find in an hour. But Evelyn couldn't wait. She opened a local Facebook group, one of those neighborhood pages where everything from lost cats to power outages got posted. She typed in Gareth Langdon. One post popped up, dated 2 years prior. Anyone have Gareth Langdon's number? He used to mow our yard near Lakeview Heights. Haven't seen him in months. Lakeview Heights. That was on the far side of town. Secluded, private. Evelyn opened her Maps app and typed in the name. A narrow web of roads and cabin homes surrounded a small lake. She scanned the area, then froze. One address had a listing under the name G. Langdon, a small, single-level home tucked between pine trees. The satellite view showed an old pickup truck in the gravel drive and what looked like rows of tools stacked beside a detached shed. Her throat tightened. This was it. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat, scribbled a note for her assistant to cover the front desk, and clipped the puppy's leash to its collar. We're going for a ride, she whispered. The drive to Lakeview was silent. The puppy lay still in the back seat. No barking, no whining. But Evelyn kept checking the rearview mirror. She couldn't shake the feeling that this trip wasn't just about finding someone. It was about confronting something long left in the dark. She pulled onto a dirt road that wound through dense trees. The GPS chirped, "You have arrived." Evelyn parked across from a rusted mailbox with Langdon painted in peeling black letters. The house itself was small, square, and quiet. No signs of movement, just a faint trail of smoke curling from the chimney. She took a breath and stepped out. The puppy followed, ears perked, nose twitching. When they approached the edge of the gravel path, Evelyn reached for the leash, but the puppy tensed, then growled. Low, deep. She froze. The door opened before she could knock. And there he was, tall, gaunt, late 30s. Dark eyes set too deep in his face, like shadows had made their home there. His clothes were stained, hands rough, and in those eyes Evelyn saw it. Recognition. Not of her, of the puppy. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The air between them turned electric. The puppy began barking, wildly, frantically, straining at the leash. Evelyn stepped forward. Mr. Langdon. His face darkened. You should leave, he said, voice flat. I have questions about the night of the Grafton fire. I said leave, but Evelyn didn't move. She pulled the collar from her coat pocket and held it out. This belonged to Liam Grafton's dog. Langdon's eyes narrowed. His shoulders tensed. He didn't reach for it. I don't know anything about that. The collar was found yesterday on a puppy left behind a grocery store. The same puppy you're looking at now. Langdon's gaze flicked to the dog, and then to the forest behind his house, and Evelyn saw it. Fear, not guilt, not denial. Fear. Something in him was terrified, and that terrified her. Why are you scared? She asked softly. Langdon stepped back inside and slammed the door shut. A lock clicked. Evelyn stared at the door, the echo of the slam ringing in her ears. And then a voice spoke, not from the house, from behind her. You shouldn't be here. She turned. A man stood in the woods, half hidden by shadow, watching. She thought she was investigating the past, but someone in the shadows had been watching her every move, and now the past was watching back. Evelyn spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. The man in the woods stepped forward slowly, tall with a thick coat and hood pulled low over his face. His posture wasn't threatening, but there was something unreadable in his movements, like he'd spent years learning how to make himself invisible. You shouldn't be here, he repeated, voice low, barely above the wind. Evelyn's grip tightened on the puppy's leash. Who are you? The man didn't answer. Do you know Gareth Langdon? She asked, heart thudding in her chest. Still no reply. But the puppy reacted before the man could. It growled, a strange, guttural sound, and pressed against Evelyn's leg, eyes locked on the stranger. The man noticed. His expression faltered. I saw you, he murmured, as if speaking to the dog. I saw you by the ruins. Evelyn's blood ran cold. You were at the Grafton house? The man looked at her now. Director. Eyes hollow, dark with exhaustion and something deeper. Guilt. I was there that night, he said, but not like they said. Not how it was written down. Who are you? Evelyn demanded again. I used to be someone else, he replied. Back before the fire. Back before the lies. A silence stretched between them. Then he glanced toward Langdon's house. You're barking up the wrong tree, he said. Gareth, he didn't start the fire. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Then who did? The man turned. That's a question people in this town don't want answered. Why not? Because if you answer it, you might find out just how much was covered up to keep a secret buried. He took a few steps back into the trees. Wait, Evelyn called out. Please, what happened to Liam? The man stopped. Then in the quietest voice she'd heard yet, he said, Liam's still out there, but he doesn't know who he is. And just like that, he disappeared into the woods. Evelyn stood frozen. The puppy pressed closer to her, its breathing quick. She knew what fear looked like in animals, and right now this dog was scared, not just of the man, but of what he meant. She looked back at Langdon's house. No movement, no sound. A curtain fluttered upstairs. Had he seen the man too? She wasn't sure. Evelyn didn't wait to find out. She and the puppy got back in the car. As she drove away, her mind raced, looping over the stranger's words. Liam's still out there, but he doesn't know who he is. What did that mean? How could someone survive and not remember? And then it hit her. Dissociative amnesia. She'd studied it briefly in college. Cases where trauma survivors, especially children, blocked out entire chunks of their past. In extreme situations, they forgot who they were entirely. It wasn't just rare, it was survival. She returned to the clinic just after sunset. The sky was streaked with violet and red, like bruises stretching across the horizon. Inside, the lights buzzed softly. The air felt heavy, as though the building itself had been waiting for her return. She set the puppy down in the recovery room and sat on the floor beside it. You remember him, don't you? She whispered. Even if he doesn't remember you. The puppy rested its chin on her leg. Evelyn opened her laptop again and went back to the news archives. She searched for children with memory loss, missing persons found with no past, Any name that might fit. Nothing. Then she had an idea. She pulled up foster care records, started scanning files from the 6 months following the Grafton fire. One entry made her breath catch. Unidentified male child. Approximate age 6. Found wandering roadside near Mason County. No ID, no memory. Name given by foster agency, Jonah Cross. Jonah Cross. She clicked through the files. Placement after placement, no family, no match in the missing persons database. His real name had never been found. And then, at the bottom of the file, a note from a psychologist. Patient exhibits signs of severe trauma-related dissociation. Represses memories involving fire, family, and animals. Strong emotional reaction to dogs, both fear and affection. Evelyn sat back, stunned. Jonah Cross was Liam Grafton. She pulled up the most recent placement record. He was still in Graybridge, still working here, and his current address was listed as a construction site office. Her hands shook as she picked up her phone, because she already knew the man's face. She'd met him before. The quiet young contractor who had delivered repair estimates to the clinic a month ago, who'd knelt to pet the puppy like it was something sacred. She didn't know it then, but Liam Grafton had been standing in front of her all along. She'd looked into the eyes of a stranger, only to find a child who never came home. Now the truth was staring back at her, even if he didn't know it yet. The construction site on the east side of Graybridge buzzed faintly under the late evening sky. Metal scaffolding framed the skeleton of a future home, and the clang of tools echoed off concrete walls. Floodlights cast long shadows across gravel and plywood. Evelyn parked near the foreman's trailer, her fingers trembling against the steering wheel. The puppy sat beside her in the passenger seat, tense but focused, its eyes fixed on the far end of the site. She saw him there, Jonah Cross, tall, lean, same calm face, same quiet posture. He was scribbling something onto a clipboard, unaware of the storm about to reach him. Evelyn stepped out of the car slowly, holding the leash tight as the puppy jumped down beside her. Its tail wagged, but hesitantly, like it already knew this moment mattered. She called out softly, "Jonah!" He turned, confused at first. Then his brows lifted in faint recognition. "Dr. Marlowe?" he said, wiping dust from his hands. "Everything okay at the clinic?" Evelyn forced a smile. "There's something we need to talk about." He looked down at the puppy. It stared back, and something flickered across his face. A twitch in his jaw, a breath that caught mid-inhale. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, kneeling automatically. The puppy lunged forward, pressing its head against his chest. Jonah froze. The clipboard dropped from his hand. He didn't move, didn't breathe. He stared down at the dog like he'd just seen a ghost rise from the earth. His fingers hovered in the air, trembling. "Are you all right?" Evelyn asked softly. He looked up, and his eyes, usually steady, were wide and terrified. Why does he feel familiar?" he whispered. Evelyn took a careful step forward. "Because he is." Jonah stood, backing away slightly. I don't understand." "You were found wandering outside Mason County," she said gently. "No ID, no memory. They called you Jonah, but that's not your name." He shook his head. "What are you talking about? Your name is Liam, Liam Grafton." The color drained from his face. "No," he said quickly, voice trembling. "That's not me. I don't remember any of that." "You were 6, she continued. "You lived at 237 Willowridge Lane. You had a dog, a golden puppy named Lucky." Jonah's knees buckled. He grabbed onto a post to steady himself. I can't." "Look at him," Evelyn said, kneeling beside the puppy. "He remembers you. He found you." The puppy sat, unmoving, eyes fixed on Jonah with unwavering recognition. "I've been trying to piece this together," Evelyn continued. "You disappeared the night of the fire. Someone pulled you out before the flames took the house. They never came forward. You were placed into foster care with no memory of who you were." Jonah turned away, his hand covering his mouth. I see flashes, sometimes, fire, screaming, a voice calling my name, but I never knew if it was real or just, it was real, she said. He dropped to his knees, and the puppy walked forward, slow and careful, like approaching something sacred. Then, it licked his cheek. Jonah let out a sharp breath and buried his face into its fur, his whole body shaking as if years of pressure had finally cracked him open. I used to have dreams, he choked out, about a house I'd never seen, about a woman who laughed like summer, a man who carried me on his shoulders. I thought I was making them up. You weren't, Evelyn said, voice thick with emotion. They were your family. I forgot them, he sobbed. I forgot everything. No, she whispered, kneeling beside him. You didn't forget. You survived. The puppy curled beside him, tail wagging, body pressed tight as though trying to keep him from falling apart. Jonah looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. What happened to them? Evelyn hesitated, and then told him the truth. There was a fire. They didn't make it out. Only you did. But the person who saved you never told anyone who you were. You disappeared. He nodded slowly, like each word landed like a stone in his chest. I didn't mean to forget them, he whispered. I know, she said. And they wouldn't have blamed you. You were just a child trying to survive the unthinkable. He turned back to the dog. Lucky, he whispered, the name cracking as it passed through him. Is that really you? The dog didn't answer, but it didn't have to. In its eyes was the memory of a boy who once called it family, and the promise that some bonds never break, no matter how much time or pain passes. He survived the fire, but to reclaim his life, he needed to find the one man who saved him, and vanished like a ghost. The clinic was quiet that evening, its lights dimmed, the scent of lavender diffusing gently through the recovery room. Evelyn sat across from Jonah at her office desk, a hot mug of tea between them, mostly untouched. The puppy, now fully relaxed, lay beside Jonah's feet like it had known him all its life. Jonah still hadn't spoken much since their reunion at the construction site, but his silence wasn't avoidance. It was reverence. Every word Evelyn had told him kept echoing in his mind. So much of it still feels impossible, he said finally, voice low and raw, like I'm wearing someone else's memories. Evelyn nodded, gently pushing a folder across the desk toward him. That someone is you. This is everything we have. News articles, witness accounts, timelines. It's yours now. He opened the folder slowly. Photographs, newspaper clippings. A copy of the missing person poster with his 6-year-old face staring back at him. And one image in particular made his breath catch. A grainy black and white photo of his family standing in front of the house on Willeridge. His mother had her arms wrapped around him. His older sister grinned, holding the puppy. His dad stood behind them all, hands resting protectively on their shoulders. Jonah touched the edge of the picture, like it might vanish if he wasn't careful. I know I'm not supposed to remember, he whispered. But I do. Her pancakes on Sunday mornings. My dad's terrible singing in the car. The way Lucky used to fall asleep on my lap after dinner. You're not imagining it, Evelyn said gently. It's coming back. Because you're ready now. He looked up. Do you think the person who saved me that night? Do you think they're still out there? I think so, she said. And I think I may know who it is. She pulled out another sheet of paper, one Nora had faxed over hours earlier. It was a scanned witness report from a retired firefighter named Tom Reynolds. He was there that night, on the crew that responded to the fire. He mentioned seeing someone, another man, in gear, who entered the building before anyone else. But he never reported it officially because he thought it was another responder. Was it? Jonah asked. Number all emergency personnel were accounted for. But this man, he pulled you out and disappeared. The theory is he was injured, possibly suffered head trauma, and never came forward because he couldn't. Jonah stared. You're saying he forgot too? It's possible. Trauma does that, and Nora thinks she found him. She handed Jonah a printout, an old news clipping from a rural town 3 hours north. The headline read, Local recluse identified as former firefighter after anonymous tip. Below it was a photograph, faded, weathered, but clear. A thin older man with sunken eyes and white stubble, sitting on a porch, clutching a worn walking cane. He lives in a care home now, in Cedar Pines, Evelyn said. Name's Elias Gray. No known family. Used to serve in the Gray Bridge Fire Department. Jonah's eyes locked on the photo, and the strangest thing happened. He gasped. Evelyn, he whispered. I know this face. She blinked. You do? I've seen him, Jonah said. In my dreams. Or maybe memories. A man pulling me from flames, carrying me. His face was blurry, but those eyes, I know them. Evelyn's breath caught. You need to meet him, she said softly. If he's the one who saved you, he deserves to know you survived. Jonah looked back down at Lucky, who had lifted his head and was watching them closely now, ears perked. Do you think I can handle it? He asked. You survived a fire that no one else could, she said. You've already handled more than most people ever will. But yes, I think you can. Jonah's shoulders sank with a mixture of fear and hope. He reached for the photograph again and held it like it was the final piece of a puzzle he never thought he'd complete. Then we leave tomorrow, he said. I want to look him in the eyes and say thank you. He'd saved a life and then disappeared into silence. Now, decades later, the child he rescued was standing at his door, with questions only he could answer. The drive to Cedar Pines was quiet. The highway stretched beneath the wheels like a silver ribbon, winding through pine-covered hills and past sleepy rural towns. In the back seat, Lucky rested his head against Jonah's leg, occasionally nudging him with quiet encouragement. Evelyn sat behind the wheel, keeping her eyes on the road, but stealing glances through the rearview mirror. Jonah hadn't said much since they left Graybridge. He was deep in thought, one hand resting on the photograph of Elias Gray, the other gently stroking Lucky's fur. You okay? Evelyn asked finally, voice soft. I don't know, Jonah replied honestly. I feel like I'm walking into a dream I've been trying to wake up from my whole life. Evelyn nodded. Sometimes the truth is the only thing that can bring us back. They arrived just after noon. Cedar Pines Elder Care was nestled on a quiet hill, surrounded by cedar trees that reached high into the blue sky. The building itself was simple, a single-story structure with a wide front porch and rocking chairs lined up in neat rows. Inside, a friendly nurse greeted them and confirmed that Elias was out back in the garden area. He spends most of his afternoons there, she said. Quiet man, keeps to himself. But if you're friends, I'm sure he'll be glad to see you. Evelyn smiled politely. He doesn't know we're friends yet, she thought. They followed a narrow path around the building to a stone-paved courtyard. A small fountain bubbled gently in the center, and flower beds lined the edges with bursts of yellow and lavender. Elias Gray sat on a wooden bench beneath a tree, reading a weathered book. He wore a thick sweater, and a navy blue cap shaded his face. His hands were veined and pale but steady. The moment Evelyn saw him, her breath caught. There was something about the way he sat, calm, heavy with memory. Elias, she called softly. He looked up, and when his eyes landed on Jonah, something behind them flickered, like a candle struggling to ignite. Jonah froze. I know you, he whispered. Elias stood slowly, book slipping from his lap. Your name, he said, voice gravelly. I can't. You pulled me out of a fire, Jonah said, taking a careful step forward. You carried me through smoke. I remember the sound of your voice. You told me not to look back. Elias's hand trembled. I thought you were gone, he said, eyes misting. I never knew if you made it. After that night, I was in the hospital for weeks. They said I had a concussion, memory loss. By the time I could speak straight again, no one believed me. Jonah took another step, voice thick. I didn't even know who I was until a few days ago. But somehow, I always remembered you. Lucky patted forward and gently placed his paws on Elias's knees. The old man looked down at the dog and let out a trembling breath. Lucky, he whispered. The name passed between them like a ghost re-entering the world. Jonah sat beside him, You saved me, he said, voice breaking. And then you disappeared. I didn't mean to, Elias said, eyes wet. I thought I'd failed. I couldn't face anyone. I left because I couldn't live with the idea that I'd saved one, and lost the rest. You didn't fail, Jonah said. You did the impossible. You gave me a second chance. Elias looked away, jaw tight. I still see their faces, he said quietly. Your parents, your sister. I hear them calling. Every night. I should have gone back for them. You were one man, Evelyn said gently, stepping closer. And you did more than anyone else could that night. You gave this boy his future. Elias looked up at her, then back at Jonah. I've waited a long time to hear that. The two of them sat in silence for a moment. Just a boy and an old man, both broken by the same fire, both rebuilt by the same impossible bond. Jonah reached into his pocket and pulled out the photo of his family. I've been holding on to this, he said, and now I think it belongs to both of us. Elias took it, his fingers trembling. He studied the smiling faces, the sunlight frozen in that summer afternoon forever. I remember this day, he whispered. Your dad made lemonade too sour. Your mom burned the burgers. We laughed about it for hours. You were there? Jonah asked, eyes wide. Elias nodded slowly. I used to help your father with the grill. Every other Sunday. We weren't just neighbors, Jonah. We were friends. The realization hit Jonah like a wave. Elias had known them, loved them, and saved what little he could when the fire came. I'm glad I found you, Jonah said softly. Elias wiped a tear from his cheek and looked at Lucky, who was now lying at his feet. I think, he said, voice cracking, he found us both. He left as a forgotten boy with no name. Now he was returning as the truth, living proof that some stories refuse to stay buried. The sun dipped low behind the hills as Evelyn's car rolled back into Graybridge, casting golden light across the storefronts and sidewalks of the town that had unknowingly sheltered a missing child for nearly 2 decades. Jonah sat in the passenger seat, one hand resting gently on Lucky's back, the other holding the photo of his family, now worn soft at the edges from hours of quiet gripping. They didn't speak for most of the ride, but it wasn't silence between them. It was something stronger. Peace. I don't even know what I'm coming back to, Jonah said quietly as they passed the old fire station. No one knows me, and I don't really know them either. Evelyn gave a soft smile. They might not remember your name, Jonah, but your story is part of this town's bones. You're coming home, even if it takes time to feel like it. He nodded slowly. And what if some people don't believe it, or don't want to face it? Then we show them, she replied, with truth and kindness, and maybe a dog who never gave up. As they pulled up to the clinic, Henry Bennett's pickup was already in the driveway. Evelyn had called him while they were leaving Cedar Pines, told him Jonah had something he needed to say in person. The door to the clinic opened as they stepped out. Henry stood tall on the porch, hands in his jacket pockets, expression unreadable. Jonah hesitated, but Lucky didn't. The dog trotted up to Henry, tail wagging, then sat right at his feet, looking up as if to say, "It's time." Henry looked from the dog to Jonah, and his breath caught. He studied the man in front of him, the shape of the jaw, the deep brown eyes, the slight tilt of his head. "Liam," he whispered. Jonah's throat tightened. "I didn't remember until now," he said, "but I always felt you out there, like a tether." Henry stepped forward slowly, like a man approaching a dream he never dared to believe in. "I searched," he said, voice trembling. "I searched until I didn't know what I was searching for anymore. But I never stopped hoping." Jonah's voice broke. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come back." Henry pulled him into a hug, tight, warm, breaking years of silence in a single breath. "You're here now," Henry whispered. "That's all that matters." Evelyn watched from the porch, tears welling behind her eyes. It was a reunion that should have happened years ago, but somehow, against every odd, it still mattered. Maybe even more now. Later that night, they sat together at the clinic, Jonah, Evelyn, Henry, and Lucky, surrounded by case files, photographs, and memory. And for the first time, Jonah told his story. I don't remember the fire itself, he began. Not really, just the heat, and a voice telling me not to look back. He looked over at Evelyn, then to Henry. I remember running, trees, sleeping under leaves, someone feeding me from their lunchbox, a name, Jonah, that they started using because I wouldn't answer to anything else. He paused, hand resting on Lucky's head. I was hiding. I think some part of me knew that going back would mean remembering everything I'd lost. So I buried it, all of it. Henry leaned forward. And now? I'm ready, Jonah said, to remember, to rebuild. Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out a folded flyer, an invitation for the town's annual remembrance event, held every year on the anniversary of the Grafton fire. Maybe this is how we start, she said. You come, you share your story, you give them back something they thought was lost. Jonah stared at the flyer, silent, then nodded. I don't want to hide anymore. The town gathered to mourn the past, never expecting a ghost would walk into the light, carrying a truth too powerful to ignore. Graybridge's Central Park was quiet that evening. Rows of folding chairs lined the grass beneath strings of golden lights that swayed gently in the breeze. Candles flickered in glass jars. Handwritten names were scrawled on placards near the stage. Among them, one stood out, Liam Grafton, the boy they thought had died. Evelyn stood off to the side of the small wooden stage, watching as neighbors, city workers, and families slowly filled the seats. She spotted familiar faces, Nora Bellamy, Henry Bennett, Tom Reynolds, even Paige Ellery. Everyone was here for the annual memorial of the Grafton fire, a tradition that had always been about remembering what was lost. But tonight was about what had been found. Jonah stood behind the curtain at the edge of the platform, shoulders tense, hands shaking slightly. He could hear the soft hum of voices, the occasional cough, a nervous shuffle of feet. Beside him, Lucky sat calmly, steady, loyal, like a shadow from his childhood, refusing to let him fall again. You ready? Evelyn whispered, stepping up beside him. Jonah nodded, eyes focused. Let's give them the truth, he said. The mayor, a kind-faced woman named Ruth Cantor, stepped up to the microphone, clearing her throat. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began, her voice echoing through the speakers. As always, we gather to honor those lost in the Willow Ridge fire. Marshall, Elise, and Anna Grafton. And for the little boy who never came home. A hush fell over the crowd. Ruth's voice softened. But tonight, that story changes. People shifted in their seats. Because tonight we welcome someone back. The curtain parted. Jonah stepped forward. At first there was only silence, then whispers, gasps. A woman stood. Her hand flew to her mouth. Is that? Another leaned toward her friend. It can't be. Evelyn held her breath as Jonah reached the microphone. I never thought I'd stand here, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd, clear but trembling. Because for most of my life, I didn't know I was supposed to. He looked out across the sea of faces, some shocked, some tearful, all riveted. My name is Liam Grafton. The words hit the crowd like a ripple across water. He continued, voice steadier now. I survived that fire. I don't know how. I didn't remember my name. I didn't remember my family. I became someone else. Jonah Cross, a kid passed through foster homes, always feeling like something was missing. He looked down briefly at Lucky, who sat proudly at his feet. And then one day, this dog showed up. He didn't just find me. He woke me up. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as Jonah went on. He carried a collar, one with my family's address. That led to memories, to people who hadn't forgotten me, and to the man who risked everything to pull me from the flames. He looked out at the crowd again. I don't remember every moment of my past, but I remember enough. I remember my mother's voice when she sang to me, my sister's laugh, the way my father used to lift me up just to show me the stars. A breeze rustled the trees, carrying his words through the night. I spent so long hiding from the truth, But tonight, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm standing here as proof that healing is possible, that hope can outlive fire. He paused, and that sometimes the love we think we've lost comes back in a form we never expected. Lucky let out a single soft bark, as if right on cue. The crowd erupted into quiet sobs and applause. Ruth Cantor stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Jonah's shoulder. "Welcome home, Liam," she said, her voice trembling. "We never stopped hoping." After the event, people gathered around him, not to question, but to hug, to shake his hand, to thank him. One woman holding her daughter's hand whispered, "You gave us all something we didn't realize we needed, a reason to believe again." Jonah stood in the center of the park, surrounded by candlelight, community, and warmth. And for the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to belong. He couldn't rebuild what was lost, but he could plant something new where pain once lived. A garden not of flowers, but of memory, hope, and return. The days after the memorial were a blur of motion. Visits from neighbors, media inquiries, even handwritten letters slipped under the clinic door. But through it all, Jonah remained grounded, centered by Lucky's constant presence and Evelyn's quiet support. Graybridge wasn't just remembering the Graftons now, they were remembering him. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, Jonah and Evelyn stood at the edge of the overgrown lot where the Grafton house had once stood. The burned foundation was now swallowed by weeds, but the air still carried echoes of laughter, of grief, of time suspended. "This is where it ended," Jonah said, gazing across the field. "But it doesn't have to be where it stops." Evelyn glanced at him. "What are you thinking?" "I want to turn it into something," he said. "Not another house, not a monument, something alive." He pulled out a rough sketch he'd drawn the night before. A winding stone path, patches of wildflowers, benches beneath old trees. At the center, a circle of engraved stones, each bearing the name of someone lost, with space left for the names people weren't ready to say aloud yet. "A memorial garden," he said, "for everyone in this town who's lost something they couldn't explain, for stories that didn't get told." Evelyn's voice softened. "That's beautiful." "I want to build it with my own hands," Jonah added. "Not as Liam Grafton, the boy who disappeared, but as the man who came back." Over the next week, the project began. Word spread fast. The lot was cleared by volunteers, some who remembered Liam as a boy, others who hadn't even been born yet, but wanted to help. Tom Reynolds showed up with a truck full of tools. Paige Ellery arrived with a tray of wildflower seedlings from her backyard. Even Nora Bellamy stopped by after work to help dig. Jonah stood at the center of it all, shovel in hand, sleeves rolled up, sweat streaking the dirt across his skin. He worked beside old classmates who barely recognized him, elders who used to drop mail at the Grafton doorstep, teenagers who'd only ever heard whispers of the fire. And Evelyn? She was there every single day, guiding, supporting, making sure Jonah didn't try to carry it all alone. Henry stopped by frequently too, bringing lemonade and stories from years long gone. "Your mother loved lavender," he said one day, planting a row along the garden path. "She said it made the air feel softer." Jonah didn't say anything. He just nodded, eyes glassy, and patted the soil gently. Lucky roamed the grounds like a tiny foreman, nosing loose bricks into place, barking gently when someone needed encouragement. Everyone adored him. Children flocked to him like a magnet, and in the quiet moments, Jonah would sit with him in the grass, scratching behind his ears and whispering, "We're almost there, bud." One afternoon, as Jonah was laying the final stones near the garden's entrance, a woman approached slowly, middle-aged, nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a folded photo. "Are you Liam?" she asked. He looked up, wiped his brow and nodded. She handed him the photo. It was a picture of a young man in army fatigues. "My son," she said. "We lost him 10 years ago. He always wanted a place like this. Thank you for giving it to him." Jonah swallowed hard and added her son's name to a blank stone. By the end of the week, the garden was ready. Lavender and daisies swayed in the breeze. A new bench, handcrafted by Jonah, bore the carved words, "For what was lost." for what was found, for what still waits to bloom. A small plaque at the gate simply read, "The Grafton Garden," and on opening day, the entire town came. Children ran barefoot across the grass. Old friends reunited. Families stood silently by stones etched with the names they thought the world had forgotten. Jonah watched it all from the garden's heart, Lucky lying at his feet. He didn't need a parade. He didn't need a title. He just needed this, a place where grief and love could grow together. Evelyn joined him, sitting quietly on the bench beside him. "You built this," she whispered, "out of ashes." He turned to her, eyes full of quiet strength. "No," he said, "we built this. Every person who never gave up." He looked down at Lucky and smiled. "And one little dog who brought me back." He found his name, his home, and his history. But now he had to decide if he was ready for something even scarier, a future. The garden had become a living thing. Less than a month after it opened, people were still stopping by every day, leaving photos, planting fresh flowers, sitting on benches in silence. Kids ran their fingers across the carved names while asking questions their parents had never been brave enough to answer before. Jonah had started showing up early, before the sun rose, just to walk the path in silence with Lucky by his side. It was during one of those early mornings that Evelyn found him. She stood at the edge of the lavender bed, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her cardigan. She didn't speak at first, just watched him, the way he moved, slow, thoughtful, at home. "I brought coffee," she said eventually, holding up a to-go tray. Jonah turned and smiled. It was different now, his smile, not weighed down by ghosts. It still carried shadows, yes, but there was light too. "Thank you," he said, taking a cup. "You always show up with perfect timing." She sat beside him on the bench under the old willow. Lucky curled up in the grass at their feet. "I never asked," Evelyn said gently. "But what now? You've rebuilt your story, helped heal this town. What do you want?" Jonah stared into the steam curling from the coffee lid. "That's the question I've been avoiding," he said. "For so long, I didn't think I deserved anything else. I thought surviving was enough. But now," he looked up, meeting her eyes, "I want more." Evelyn's breath caught slightly. "Like what?" "A life, a home, maybe something simple, quiet, real." He hesitated, then added, "and maybe someone to share it with." There was no dramatic pause, no cinematic music, just a soft silence as they looked at each other. The weight of what they'd been through clung to the air between them. But beneath it, something else had begun to grow. Something gentler than survival, something warmer than grief. Love. Neither of them said the word, but it didn't need to be said. Instead, Evelyn reached down and scratched Lucky behind the ears. "You know, I never told you this, but before all this started, I'd shut myself off too. After James, after Charlie, I convinced myself healing was for other people, not for me." She looked up. "Then this dog showed up, and with him, you." Jonah took a slow breath, the corner of his mouth tugging upward. "Smart dog." "Too smart," she smiled. They sat there for a while, sipping coffee, the willow tree swaying overhead. At one point, Lucky rolled over and let out a sleepy grunt, his paws twitching in a dream. Jonah chuckled softly. "He used to do that as a puppy," he said. "Same sleep sounds, same paw twitches." "He still is a puppy," Evelyn teased. Jonah nodded, gaze distant. "I guess it's just hard to separate the memory from the miracle." The town had started calling Lucky the dog who brought Liam home, but Jonah had started calling him something else. "Do you think," he said quietly, "I should keep his name?" Evelyn looked at him. "I think it's his name. And yours." He turned back to the path that wound through the garden. "I used to be afraid of quiet," he said, "of stillness, like it meant something bad was coming. And now? Now I think it just means peace." The next day, Jonah stopped by the clinic again, but not for an appointment. He carried a small cardboard box, inside it, a collar. a leash, a toy he carved himself. I was wondering, he asked Evelyn, trying to keep his voice casual, if Lucky could stay here sometimes when I go out of town for construction jobs. You mean, she said, raising an eyebrow, we take care of him? Jonah smiled. We? That word echoed longer than either of them admitted out loud. Later that night, as Jonah stood on the porch of Henry's house, watching the sun dip behind the hills, he felt Lucky lean against his leg. I think we're doing it, he whispered to the dog. I think we're building a life again. And for the first time in years, he believed it. He rebuilt his life piece by piece, but a knock at the door brought news that could shatter it all again. Because some stories don't end when the truth is found, they twist. The evening air was still. Jonah sat on Henry's porch with a mug of tea in his hands, watching the soft golden light fade across the horizon. Lucky lay curled near the stairs, his ears twitching at the distant chirp of crickets. It had been a peaceful week, the kind Jonah never imagined he'd get to live. Until the knock came. 3 short raps, firm, unexpected. He stood blinking into the dusk. Henry was still out at a town council meeting, and Evelyn wasn't due to stop by until the morning. Jonah opened the door cautiously. A woman stood there, late 30s, professional, hair tied back in a loose braid. Her eyes were sharp, scanning him in a way that immediately made his spine straighten. Liam Grafton? She asked. Jonah tensed. I go by Jonah now. Who are you? She pulled a badge from her coat pocket. Claire Arlen, State Bureau of Missing Persons. I've been assigned to a cold case reopened after media flagged your story, she said. I'm here because someone came forward after seeing your picture in the Graybridge Gazette. Jonah's mouth went dry. Who? Claire hesitated. He didn't leave a name. He made a phone call, said he had information about the fire, about who really said it. Jonah froze. We believed it was accidental, he said quietly. Faulty wiring. That's what the report said. They did, Claire replied, but we never had definitive proof. And the person who called, he didn't say it wasn't an accident. He said it wasn't random. Jonah leaned against the doorframe, trying to steady himself. Why now? He asked. Because your return changed everything, Claire said. You coming forward gave us a reason to reopen the case. Your living proof something about the original story was wrong. Jonah felt Lucky brush against his leg, an anchor in the storm. I don't want to live in the past anymore, he said quietly. I understand, she replied, her voice gentler now. But this isn't about dragging you backward. It's about finally pulling the truth forward. You deserve to know. He looked at her, long, searching. Do you think someone meant to hurt us? He asked. Claire didn't answer directly. Instead, she handed him a manila folder. Inside were a few blurred photos. One of a gas utility van parked on Willow Ridge Lane, dated the night of the fire. Another, an image pulled from traffic cam footage of a man walking 2 blocks from the Grafton home minutes before the first flames were reported. And then, the last one, a face, shadowed, hard to read, but something about it sparked a cold flicker in Jonah's chest. Who is this? He asked. We're trying to confirm, but the caller said it was someone your family knew. Claire hesitated. Jonah, he also said your family was being threatened, that they'd been warned. Jonah's grip on the folder tightened. No one ever told me that, he said. No one ever told anyone, Claire replied. The threats weren't on record, but if what this caller said is true, your family didn't just die, they were targeted. A silence stretched between them. Then Claire added, we'd like you to come with us to verify what you can. We're not forcing anything, but your story could help us finally figure out why someone tried to bury the truth that night. Jonah looked down at Lucky, then back at Claire. I'll help, he said, but only if this leads to answers, not more silence. Claire nodded. We don't want silence. We want justice. As she turned to leave, she paused and glanced over her shoulder. And Jonah, be careful. If what we suspect is true, someone may not be happy that you're back. The door clicked shut behind her. Jonah stood there for a long time, staring at the folder. The quiet he'd worked so hard to find had just been cracked open again, and behind it, a fire still burning. He thought he'd already unearthed the truth, but the fire didn't just steal his past. It buried secrets deep enough to shake the foundations of everything he believed. The next morning, Jonah sat inside the Graybridge Sheriff's office, a folder clutched tightly in his hands. Lucky lay at his feet, tail still, ears twitching at every sound. Evelyn had offered to come with him, but Jonah had asked her to wait until he was ready. This part, this part felt like something he needed to face alone. Claire Arlen sat across from him, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes of archived files. She had already laid out a corkboard with pins and strings crisscrossing from photo to document. A map of Willow Ridge Lane was tacked to one corner. "This is everything we've recovered from the original case files," she explained, but much of it was fragmented. Some reports were misfiled, others were never followed up on. Jonah stared at the board. It looked like chaos, a life broken into clues. Claire pointed to a note clipped to the top corner. "This is what started it," she said. "The anonymous caller. He claimed there were 3 warnings sent to your parents. Letters, each one more urgent than the last." "Were they found in the house?" Jonah asked. "Number. That's the problem. The fire destroyed most personal items. But there's something else." She handed him an old envelope, scorched around the edges but still legible. Inside was a photograph. It showed a group of men standing in front of a construction site. Jonah's father was one of them, and so was someone else. Jonah's stomach dropped. "That's," he started, pointing to the man on the right, whose eyes seemed too cold, even in a frozen image. "Gareth Langdon," Claire finished, "the landscaper your family occasionally hired. We've cross-referenced him with the blurry security photo from the night of the fire. We're 80% sure it's a match. But he said he didn't know anything," Jonah whispered. "When I confronted him months ago, he was scared, not guilty." Claire nodded. "He might not have set the fire himself, but he could have known who did, or why." She leaned forward. "Jonah, your father was part of a zoning dispute 2 weeks before the fire. He filed a complaint with the county over an illegal land deal happening right behind your neighborhood. He listed several contractors and utility partners as being involved, including a company Langdon worked for. A week later, your family started receiving anonymous letters." Jonah's hands shook. "You're saying the fire wasn't just tragedy, it was revenge? We believe it was meant as a warning or a silencer?" Jonah couldn't breathe for a moment. "I was just a kid," he whispered. "Why would someone try to erase an entire family over a zoning complaint?" "Because sometimes," Claire said gently, "the paper trail leads to the kind of secrets that ruin careers, or send people to prison, and someone may have decided your dad was too much of a risk." Jonah sat back, everything tilting slightly. It had never just been a fire. It had been a message, and he'd survived it. "Do we know who pulled the trigger?" he asked quietly. "We're close," Claire said, "but we need you to help us finish the timeline. Rebuild the last 3 days before the fire as best you can." Jonah swallowed hard. "I'll try." That afternoon, Evelyn found him in the garden. She saw the weight in his shoulders before he even looked up. "They think someone set the fire on purpose," he said. Her breath caught. "Oh, Jonah. My dad was trying to stop something, and someone made sure he never got the chance." Evelyn sat beside him on the bench. "And now they know you're alive. Whoever they were." "Exactly," he said. "This isn't over." Lucky let out a soft growl, sensing the tension. Jonah looked at him and placed a hand on his head. "I didn't survive just to hide again," he said. "If I can stop whoever did this, then maybe I wasn't just spared. I was meant to come back." Evelyn turned toward him, her voice steady. "Then let's finish what your father started. The fire stole his past. The truth rebuilt his present. But only he could decide what came next. Because survival wasn't the end of his story, it was just the beginning." 3 weeks later, the air was thick with summer warmth, the kind that pressed down gently like a memory you never quite forget. Jonah stood at the edge of the Grafton garden, staring out over the curved paths and blooming lavender, his breath steady, his heart not quite. He hadn't spoken publicly since the town memorial, not since Claire called and said they'd found him. The man behind the fire, a name Jonah recognized instantly. Not Langdon, someone else, someone closer. Richard Eames, a former zoning board official. A man who had visited their house more than once under the pretense of routine reviews. Jonah remembered his sharp suits and the way his father would stiffen when he arrived. "He's under arrest," Claire had said over the phone. Enough evidence finally came to light. Letters, documents, anonymous tips. He orchestrated it, set up Langdon to act as a distraction, made sure your family would be isolated that night. Jonah had listened in silence. Claire continued. "We found your father's final letter to the board. He never got to submit it. It named Richard directly." Jonah's hands had trembled as she said the last words. "He tried to protect you." And now the truth was out. The town had rallied, grieved again. And then something beautiful happened. They moved forward. Evelyn stepped beside Jonah now, holding 2 mugs of tea. Her hand brushed his as she passed him a cup. "Quiet day?" she asked. He nodded. "The kind I used to be afraid of. And now?" "Now I'm learning to be grateful for them." Lucky came trotting up the path, a ribbon tied around his neck and a small toy hanging from his mouth. He dropped it in front of Evelyn, tail wagging proudly. Jonah laughed. "He's still trying to win you over." "He already has," she said, kneeling to scratch his ears. Jonah watched her for a long moment. He thought of the fire, of Elias Gray, of Henry, of Claire, of a town that held both the darkest night of his life and the dawn that followed it. Then softly, "You know I've been thinking about staying." Evelyn stood. "I hoped you would." "I want to do more here," he said. "Start a foundation, maybe, for lost kids, for cold cases, for people like me." Evelyn smiled. "I think that's exactly what this town needs." He looked down at the dog who had saved him, who had found him. "Maybe what I need too." They began walking through the garden path together, Lucky leading the way, their shoulders brushing with a closeness that no longer needed words. Jonah paused beside the newest stone. Marshall Grafton, Elise Grafton, Anna Grafton, never forgotten. Below it, a final inscription had been added. Liam came home, and he brought the light with him. Jonah knelt and placed his hand on the stone, eyes misty but clear. "Dad," he whispered, "I didn't forget." Lucky pressed beside him, and Evelyn knelt on his other side. "I found them," he said softly, "the ones you wanted to stop, and I'll keep fighting, I promise. But more than that, I'm living. I'm really living now." Evelyn placed a hand on his back, and he leaned into it, feeling the warmth of something he'd only dreamed of for years. Family, chosen, found, reclaimed. A breeze stirred the trees. The lavender rustled. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden streaks across the path like a painting still being finished. They stood and walked toward the garden gate together. Jonah turned once more, taking in the place that had changed everything. Then to Evelyn, "Let's go home." And Lucky barked once, soft but sure, as if to say, "We already are." If this story touched your heart, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe now and join us on more journeys where love, loyalty, and second chances come to life. And don't forget to hit that bell, because the next miracle could be just one video away.